All right, let's dive into Stoicism. We've got a really cool collection of letters here, all inspired by this ancient philosophy.
Yeah, it's amazing how relevant Stoicism still is, even though it's thousands of years old.
Totally. So for anyone just joining us, Stoicism is all about focusing on what we can control, right? Our thoughts and actions.
Exactly. It's about finding peace and stability, even when life feels chaotic.
Which, let's be honest, is pretty much all the time.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's interesting. These letters cover such a range of topics.
They really do. Everything from anxiety and making decisions.
The careers, relationship.
Even the idea of not owning anything.
Whoa, that's a big one.
Yeah, definitely something to unpack there.
Definitely. So where do we even begin with all this? It seems like mastering our inner world is a big theme.
Absolutely. And a good place to start might be with anxiety. Letter 4 actually reminds us that feeling anxious is totally normal.
Oh, yeah, I can relate to that.
Right. It's as natural as feeling hungry. And the Stoics don't say we should, pretend we don't feel anxious.
More like accept it and then focus on what we can do.
Exactly. It's not about denying it, but choosing how we respond to it.
This reminds me of letter 8 and that feeling of wanting to change our environment to escape uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah, that urge to just get out of a situation and thinking everything will be better.
I've totally been there. If I could just move or switch jobs. Yeah.
Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, actually tells a story about a friend who was constantly traveling.
Really?
Yeah, he thought changing his surroundings would cure his boredom. But Seneca's advice was to change his mindset, not his location.
So the real change needs to happen internally.
That's the Stoic idea, yeah. It's powerful, but it's also challenging.
It is. So how do we actually do that? Change our mindset instead of just our physical location?
Well, I think it starts with understanding that those external changes, like moving or switching jobs, are often temporary fixes. They might give you a quick sense of relief, but they don't really address the root of the issue.
Makes sense.
The Stoics encourage us to look inward, to examine our thoughts and beliefs, to cultivate a mindset that allows us to be okay regardless of our external circumstances.
So instead of saying, I need a vacation, maybe we should be asking ourselves, what's going on inside that needs attention?
Exactly. True freedom, according to the Stoics, comes from within, from mastering our thoughts and emotions rather than letting our external environment control us.
This brings to mind another theme from the letters, about guarding our minds from useless information, which seems especially relevant today, with constant digital distractions.
Totally. Letter 10 actually tells this great story about a Boston Celtics fan. This guy knew everything about the team, down to the players' families and everything.
Wow, that's dedication.
It is. But the point is, all that knowledge didn't actually affect the team's performance on the court.
Right. It's all that information didn't really matter in the end.
Exactly. It highlights how consuming tons of information without actually applying it can just clutter our minds. It can distract us from what truly matters.
It makes you realize that information isn't inherently valuable. It's what we do with it that counts.
I think the Stoics would agree with that. They believed that a cluttered mind is a restless mind. By protecting our mental space and focusing on what's truly important, we create that inner calm we need to navigate life's challenges with clarity.
So it's not just about consuming less information, but being more mindful of the quality of information we consume. Does that tie into the concept of single-minded focus that comes up in letters 11 and 12?
Absolutely. These letters really emphasize the power of directing our energy towards specific goals. It makes me think of a friend who decided to train for a half marathon at age 40. He set this ambitious goal for himself, not only to run the race, but to have a six-pack by the finish line.
Wow, that's commitment.
It is, and it just shows how having a clear objective, something we're passionate about and fully in control of, can give us a sense of purpose and direction. This also connects to the Stoic idea of having a personal passion project, something we can really immerse ourselves in. It helps us maintain focus and clarity in our lives.
I like that, the idea of a passion project. Because I think we often spread ourselves too thin. We have so many obligations and distractions. It's hard to really commit to something that lights us up.
That's so true. But the Stoics remind us that real fulfillment doesn't come from multitasking or chasing external rewards. It comes from aligning our actions with our values, from pursuing something that brings us genuine joy and purpose.
So it's not about doing more, but about doing what truly matters to us. And this idea of aligning actions with our values feels like a perfect segue to the next big theme in these letters, self-knowledge. The Stoics really emphasized understanding ourselves, didn't they?
They did. Self-knowledge is like the foundation for a fulfilling life, according to them. It's about understanding our true desires, values, and motivations, recognizing our strengths and weaknesses, and making choices that are in alignment with who we truly are.
This makes me think of that story in letter 14 about buying the big SUV, thinking it would lead to more adventures, but it ended up being used just like the old car.
Oh, yeah. It's so easy to fall into that trap thinking the idea of something will change us. But the Stoics encouraged us to look deeper. What void are we trying to fill? What are our true needs?
So maybe instead of buying a bigger car, we should invest in experiences that align with our values, or simplify our lives and appreciate what we already have.
Exactly. It's about moving beyond superficial desires and getting to the core of what matters. And that leads us to aligning our actions with that self-knowledge. Like in letter 17, Epictetus advises us to really think about the consequences of our actions before we act.
I see that play out all the time, especially with social media. People making impulsive decisions based on external pressures without really understanding themselves.
It's a great point. The Stoics would probably encourage us to pause, reflect, and ask ourselves, is this action aligned with who I want to be?
This all raises an interesting question, though. Once we've done that inner work, mastered our minds, gotten to know ourselves, how do we actually navigate the external world? Seems like these letters offer some guidance on that, too.
They absolutely do. And that's where Stoicism gets really practical. It's not just philosophy. It gives us tools to navigate daily life with more wisdom and resilience.
Okay, I'm ready to dive into that. Let's explore how these Stoic principles can help us make better decisions, handle tough situations, and ultimately live more fulfilling lives.
Let's do it. So thinking about how we navigate the outer world using these Stoic principles, it's interesting how many of these letters emphasize making decisions independently. It's like owning your life, even when things get tough.
Oh yeah, like in letter 19, right? It really pushes the idea of making decisions without being swayed by what other people think.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in what others think we should do, but ultimately, we're the ones who have to live with the consequences.
It's about trusting our own judgment, I guess, making choices that align with our own values, even if they're not popular.
Exactly. Recognizing that we're the authors of our own lives, we have the power to choose our own path.
Easier said than done, though, right?
Yeah.
We all want to feel accepted, to belong.
Of course. But I think the key is to find sources of validation that come from within. Instead of seeking approval from others, we can turn inward and ask ourselves, am I living in a way that I'm proud of? Am I making choices that feel true to me?
I love that. Like finding our own internal compass instead of letting external pressures guide us. But what about when things don't go our way? Those inevitable setbacks, disappointments.
That's where acceptance comes in. Letter 21 introduces this really cool idea from Marcus Aurelius, welcoming whatever happens as if we chose it.
Whoa, that's a tough one, especially when we're dealing with, loss or disappointment. Does that mean we just pretend we're not bothered by negative things?
Not exactly. It's not about suppressing our emotions. It's more about shifting our perspective. Instead of dwelling on how we wish things were different, the Stoics suggest we focus on what we can learn from the experience, even the tough ones.
So instead of getting frustrated by a delayed flight, maybe we use that time to catch up on a book or, have an interesting conversation with a stranger.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we can't always control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond.
And by responding with acceptance, we can free up all that mental energy we usually spend wishing things were different.
Totally. It's about letting go of those what ifs and should haves. This connects to another Stoic concept from letter 22, the idea of preparing for the worst to gain peace of mind.
Yeah, that letter talked about Warren Buffett's approach to insurance at Berkshire Hathaway. Plan for multiple disasters happening all at once, earthquakes, hurricanes, you name it.
It is a pretty extreme example, but it illustrates a point. By thinking about potential setbacks, we can make better decisions now and appreciate what we have.
So hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Not being pessimistic, but having a plan just in case.
Exactly. It's about approaching life with a sense of preparedness, not fear. And, sometimes just thinking through those tough scenarios can actually make us enjoy the present moment more.
Interesting. It's like acknowledging that life is unpredictable and that's okay. This reminds me of the Stoic view on the brevity of life from letters 23 and 26.
Right. Those letters talk about the idea of being visitors on this planet. It's a metaphor to help us detach from material possessions and find meaning in experiences and relationships instead.
I can see how that could be liberating. Knowing our time is limited, we can focus on what truly matters. Connection, growth, making a difference. It takes the pressure off needing to accumulate stuff.
Exactly. True wealth isn't about what we own, but about the richness of our experiences and connections.
Which leads perfectly into those letters about career and relationships. Areas where I think a lot of us struggle to find that balance and meaning. Letter 48, for example, really struck me. It talked about the importance of rest.
Rest, even before we feel tired, right?
Yes. It shared Dale Carnegie's quote, "Rest before you are tired." It's like a proactive approach to preventing burnout.
That's such a good reminder. We get so caught up in the hustle of daily life, but the Stoics remind us, rest isn't a luxury, it's essential for our minds and bodies.
It's like tending a garden. You can't expect plants to thrive without care and nourishment. We need to treat ourselves the same way.
Exactly. We're not machines. We need time to recharge. And that reminds me of the analogy in letter 49 about being an actor in a play.
Oh yeah, I love that one. It highlighted how we don't always get to choose the circumstances of our lives.
Yeah.
But we can choose how we play our role.
Right. It's about focusing on what we can control. Our effort, our attitude, our commitment to doing our best.
This reminds me of Warren Buffett's idea of the ovarian lottery. He talks about how where and when we're born plays a huge role in our opportunities. But even with those limitations, we still have choices. We can still try to make the most of it.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between acceptance and agency. We accept the things we can't change and focus on what we can. Which brings us to the topic of self-motivation, something letter 50 explores. And this has been a really relevant topic with the rise of remote work,
Totally. I've definitely struggled with that. When the boss isn't looking over your shoulder, it's easy to get distracted, lose motivation.
Yeah, it's a common challenge. Letter 50 uses that relatable example of slacking off when no one's watching to highlight how true motivation comes from within, not from external pressure.
It's like the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. The Stoics would say real fulfillment comes from doing things because we believe in them, not because we feel obligated or pressured.
Exactly. It's about finding that sense of ownership and autonomy in our work and our lives. And that connects to another interesting concept from letter 52, the power of doing less. It really challenges that go, go, go mentality that's so prevalent these days.
I like that they challenged that. That letter used the example of someone who got injured from working out too much. It really highlights the need for balance. We often think more is always better, but sometimes less is more.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that overexertion in any area of life can lead to burnout. The letter talks about how we tend to overdo things, workouts, career ambitions, social commitments, and it reminds us to find a sustainable pace.
It makes me think of Seneca's advice to exercise both body and mind with moderate, sustainable effort. Not pushing to the point of exhaustion, but finding a rhythm that lets us thrive without burning out.
Exactly. It's about listening to our bodies and our minds, knowing when we need rest. And speaking of balance, I think it's time to talk about how these Stoic principles apply to our relationships with others.
Yes. We've talked about mastering our inner world, navigating the outer world. But how does this all fit into our social interactions? That adds a whole other layer.
It does, and that's where we really see the social side of Stoicism. It's not just about individual resilience, it's about our connections with others and building meaningful relationships.
Yeah, it really is fascinating how these Stoic principles play out in our relationships. We've talked about like mastering our inner world, navigating the outer world. But relationships, they definitely add a whole other layer of complexity.
They do. And it's where we see this social aspect of Stoicism. It's not just about being resilient as an individual. It's about understanding that we're all connected, and
Right.
building meaningful relationships with others.
Exactly. It makes me think about how several of these letters talk about choosing our words carefully.
Well, yeah, it's a good one.
Oh.
Especially in today's world where everyone's so quick to comment, to rant on social media.
Right. Letter 51 actually points out how we're often more careful with our words when we're writing than when we're speaking. That's true. Like when you write, you have time to think, to edit.
Exactly. But in conversation, things just kind of tumble out. We don't always put that same level of thought into it.
It makes you wonder, what would happen if we did? Like if we were as intentional with our spoken words as we are with our written words, how would our relationships change?
It's a great question. The Stoics would probably say it's about respect. Respecting ourselves and the people we're talking to.
Because words have power, right, to build people up or tear them down.
They really do. This actually connects to another idea that resonated with me, not caring what other people think. Letter 60 really digs into this, encouraging us to let go of that need for external validation.
Oh man, that's a tough one. But I can see how it would be incredibly freeing too, to just act in accordance with your own values no matter what anyone else thinks.
It is freeing. It's about recognizing that true validation comes from within, from living a life that feels authentic to you.
Right. And that makes me think about the Stoic emphasis on virtue. Like living a virtuous life is its own reward, regardless of whether anyone else notices.
Exactly. The Stoics believed that virtue was the ultimate good, and that living a virtuous life, aligning your actions with your values, that leads to inner peace, to fulfillment, regardless of your external circumstances.
So it's not about doing the right thing for praise or recognition, but just because it's the right thing to do.
Exactly. Speaking of challenges in relationships, another one that comes up in these letters is envy. Letter 59 talks about how envy comes from this sense of lack.
Yeah, like you're not enough. And I feel like in today's world with social media, it's so easy to fall into that comparison trap. You're constantly bombarded with these like curated versions of people's lives.
It's true, but the Stoics, they'd probably say, shift your focus, look at what you have, not what you lack.
Cultivate gratitude for what's good in your own life.
Exactly. Everyone has their own journey, their own challenges and triumphs.
So it's about celebrating your own wins and finding joy in other people's successes too, not letting comparison steal your happiness.
Because comparison is the thief of joy, right? And speaking of joy, one letter that really stood out to me was letter 61, which emphasizes sharing our happiness with others.
Oh, I like that one too. It's a good reminder that Stoicism isn't about being some lone wolf, suppressing all your emotions. It's about connecting with people, finding joy in shared experiences.
Exactly. We're not meant to go through life alone.
We're social creatures, and sharing our joys and sorrows, that's part of what makes us human.
It is. The Stoics understood that. They knew we thrive when we support each other, celebrate each other's wins, and offer comfort during tough times. And speaking of tough times, these letters also have some great advice on how to deal with those inevitable challenges.
Yeah, it's easy to talk about Stoicism when everything's going great, but how do those principles actually help when things are rough?
Well, letter 62 actually talks about living through anxious times, which I think is something everyone can relate to right now.
For sure. So it's a reminder that Stoicism isn't just for good times.
Exactly. It's for when things are hard. It's about remembering you have the power to choose your response, even when things are difficult.
And finding those opportunities for growth, for connection, for gratitude.
Yeah.
Even in the midst of, challenges and setbacks.
It is. This actually connects back to that idea of accepting what we can't control. Like in letter 64, it challenges this expectation that things should always be getting better, as we get older.
Right. Like life should just be this upward trajectory.
But that's not how it works. There will be ups and downs.
Yeah.
And the Stoics embraced that.
Yeah. They understood that life isn't linear.
And those difficult experiences, they're opportunities for growth.
Yeah.
To learn more about ourselves, about the world.
It's like even in those tough times, there's always something to be grateful for, which actually reminds me, letter 63 shared this really powerful exercise from Epictetus. He said, when you're facing a challenge, think about death.
Whoa, that sounds intense.
It does. But I think the point is it puts things in perspective.
It makes you appreciate what you have right now.
Exactly. So, wow, these letters have been amazing. Such a rich source of wisdom. And I think what's really striking is how Stoicism is more than just like a set of ideas.
It's a way of life, a practical philosophy that we can use every day to make better decisions, to cultivate stronger relationships, and to find peace even when things are tough.
And it's about recognizing that power we have within ourselves, you know, that power to choose our response to any situation. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Stoicism, I want to leave you with this. If you could focus on controlling just one thing in your life right now, what would it be? Think about that, explore it, and see where it leads you. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.